is how do you go through there and identify and then close the knowledge gaps that are going to occur after an owner or other key team member retires? Because oftentimes there is. I'm thinking right now about there's a CFO at a contractor of ours that's retiring, and he's been with the company for over 40 years. Like he's got the 40-year binder, and it's one of the things that they give out. And it's interesting because he is so involved in so many different areas of the company, not as a micromanager, but he has this just encyclopedic knowledge of so many different things because he's really been honing his craft for 40 years and at one company, which is absolutely amazing. So how do you even start attacking and identifying those knowledge gaps? And you mentioned a 2X org chart planning and all that. How do you do this?
Well, it's funny because it starts, if you're lucky, someone with that much institutional knowledge knows to give you plenty of notice, right? Because they know things that they've probably forgotten more than most people will ever know. So they realize that somebody is going to need to sit next to them and see what is all happening. So a couple of things that we've done is, one is in the year or two, right? Or frankly, if you've got anybody who's been around a long time and you're in meetings and you see people, this person is up there talking, has a lot to say, and you see people feverishly taking notes, chances are there is a knowledge gap right there, right? Because it's things people don't know. So they already realize that they're going to be missing out. So when you see those pencils moving quickly across the paper, you can pretty much guess that there's information that needs to be gleaned from that person. So you mentioned the 40 years of binder, right? All the information in this binder, at least some information in this binder. Some of this goes to a training and development, and not just for that particular person, right? It's training and development in the entire organization, where you bring those people in that have this kind of knowledge, and you have them talk to small groups of up-and-comers or the managers below them, and they can take that knowledge and get it across to them on a regular basis, right? Maybe you've got an organization that's got enough people to bring together once a year, break out into small groups, and these particular leaders that are going to retire have a chance over a number of years to impart their wisdom across. I had worked for a contractor for a while where they had a training and development, mostly a training program that was set up a lot like a college curriculum, right? So when you had engineers coming in their first year, they came to a class that was literally a culture class. It talked about the culture of the company. That came from the CEO, the CFO, the COO, the large leaders in the company sat and talked to those first-year engineers. They got safety 101. They got quality 101. They had many different programs that they went to in that first year. You went to year 3 or year 4, and as you moved up, you've got, the level 200 series courses, the level 300 series courses. As you moved up higher and higher into management, you got the level 400 series or what was classified as the master's level. And you got that from the masters of the company. So the knowledge really was being passed down generation after generation. It's, listening to your grandparents tell a story, sitting in front of the fireplace every Christmas. You know that story because you've heard it so often. It's setting up a training program like that can help people get that knowledge on a regular basis that makes some sense. The other thing is, frankly, along with the training program, maybe you don't have a big enough company to do that. Give that person a list of questions, kind of like we're doing today. Have a list of questions, and they are just going to answer one question a day until you're out of questions. And you can have podcasts. You can have, just little snippets out for the company leaders to listen to. you can record all of that information in a bit more personal way than having to thumb through a binder. So it's there are many ways to do that. The other option you have, and I've seen this one work really well, is if you know the person is retiring and they are going to be, they're going to be around another year. And certainly if you're talking, David, you'd mentioned a CFO, right? CFOs have very much year-end, quarter-end. There's some things that are very calendar-driven. So if you draw a timeline and said, okay, this person's retiring, let's say, in 15 months, and if you put the retirement date at the end, the far right side, and you put today's date on the far left side, and you draw some lines in between, you can mark out, okay, here's quarter one financials, quarter two financials, all the different things that need to be done that are they're big rocks, right? I talk about big rocks as in, I'm sure everybody's seen the jar where if you put in the sand and the small rocks first, the big rocks don't fit. But if you put the big rocks in first and then the small rocks and then the sand, it all fits. You can even pour water on top of it and get more in. But it's the big rocks that have to be in there first. You take this timeline of retirement for this CFO. You put all of the information that is exceedingly important that someone else is going to need to know. And if you have this person's successor already named, now is the time to get them in there and have them not just work with the CFO, but in most cases, what I've seen is that person becomes the CFO. The CFO really starts to do more tactical things. They're the ones that now are just answering questions. They're not really producing the CFO work in the last year because they are there for the questions for the other person. There's nothing better than someone having to do the work to understand the work. Back in the day before, we had a whole lot of email and, a lot of stuff still came through the regular mail. I had one person that I was training that was going to be moving on to another area of the company and taking on literally a position exactly like mine, just somewhere else in the company. And it got to a point where I didn't answer my own phone because all the calls just got forwarded to him. When the mail came in, it all went to him. I answered no. Anybody came in and asked me a question, I would walk over with them to this guy's office and we would talk about it there. I took no independent action for probably a year because this person needed to live in my office, right? Needed to live in my work, needed to live in my reports and my conversations and my training so that they became that person, right? They weren't just watching it, they were doing it. And I had some other special projects I could be working on at the same time, but this person had to become me. And in that case, it was something that worked very, very well. But it is having a bench. It is understanding your succession planning. It is knowing the people that are going to take over for each of these people and getting them in place and making sure that you have got them in place with enough time before that key team member retires. And then, of course, the other thing you can do is when that person retires, make sure you've talked to them and say, hey, could we put an agreement together that if we need to, again, we talked consulting a bit earlier, if we need to consult with you on these particular matters, can we put a rate together and can we give you a call on these particular things? And chances are that is that will work out fine, and it's another great resource to get that information to not just walk away. So never forget to look on the other side and just even on that, not even a part-time basis, but just on an as-needed basis, that they might be available for meetings or to come back at the next, quarter end or be there for that next financial meeting just to be that fly on the wall and make sure that everything is taken care of. So there's several ways to do that, but those are the ones, David, that I have found the most intriguing and certainly the most useful on my end.
So you're saying there's not an easy button for this?
I wish there were.
Yeah, I know. Knowledge transfer is hard. So I want to put some numbers, and I love the way that you talked about, you know, how as you were phasing out, that you had somebody taking over your key responsibilities, and you were just there as a very distant safety net, so to speak, and a coach. And I think that's a piece that's really hard for people to get their heads around. So I want to talk about knowledge management just as a general term right now, and some things that people want to put into their heads. So if I'm in a technical role, like a frontline, like I'm an electrician by training, so if I'm in a frontline technical role, most of the things that I need to know about being an electrician are what they would call very explicit knowledge. These are things that can be totally documented, you know, trained. It's, you know, it is what it is. I still on my bookshelf have my books from my apprenticeship program and everything, and you remember those things. They stick with you. Now, when you move into an executive role, you know, a company owner, the president, the CEO, you are in a much different realm of knowledge, and so only about 5% of the things that you do get categorized as that explicit knowledge that can be documented in, say, a training manual or something like that. The other 95% of the knowledge that you possess that makes you effective in the organization is what they would call a tacit knowledge. And those are just like, how do you think? How would you solve a problem? How do you pull together this massive database of experiences that you have in your head and network of relationships and make something happen? And that level of knowledge cannot be transferred through standard simplistic teaching methods. Those have to be transferred through a lot of hands-on experience with an experienced coach mentor helping guide that process along. So it's very different. So don't assume that transferring and bringing on board a new electrician or a new operating engineer is the same as bringing on a new CFO, and just know that those are very different. The second dynamic that comes into play is in psychology, they call it the 4 levels of competence, and at the bottom of the pyramid is what they would call unconscious incompetence. That's basically like, I don't know what I don't know. So it becomes almost impossible to even teach somebody that because they aren't going to know what they don't know, and so they don't even see a need to go learn. Well, the other end of that pyramid, the very top of that pyramid, is also just as difficult. And at the top of the pyramid is unconscious competence, which means that they've been doing something so long, they may be a total maestro at doing that and totally amazing at making it happen, but they can't actually break it down and describe what they're doing because they've simply been doing it so long, it's like muscle memory. And so that's where sometimes having a third party, like when one of our clients has a workforce development team, and one of the things that they do is help to kind of dissect the knowledge that somebody has, both tacit and explicit, and break that down into individual training modules. It's actually really hard. It's kind of like interrogating somebody. I couldn't even imagine what pulling all of your knowledge out of your head is like, Sue. So that's you've got to attack it that way. So it is like kind of, I mean, it will feel a little bit like waterboarding. A lot of times it's not like they're not trying to give up that information. It's just that you don't know what you do that's so awesome until you're like, put in the position and you just hit the ball and you hit a home run. So those are the things that are working against you when it comes to transfer of executive knowledge. And the third leg of that we see working against you, and sometimes, and this really ties back into that retirement masterpiece, is, boy, if somebody doesn't have that next place that they want to get to, sometimes they end up holding back because a lot of times there's a psychological need to be needed. We all have that, for the most part, that's, unless you're a sociopath, that need to be needed by other people. And so if you don't have some other things that are going on in your life outside of that, you want to put yourself in a position where people are calling you on a regular basis. And so the same thing that that diminishes performance on a construction project, where you have, when you see that foreman and that superintendent where people are lined up at their door and calling them on the phone constantly, that's not Superman. Superman is the one that laid everybody out and gets a few phone calls and a few things, per day where people are checking in. So that's Superman, and but a lot of times that's that need to be needed and planning it out. So know that this is actually one of the most difficult things you'll do, and we're getting some audience questions, Sue, which is fantastic, and actually some of them tie very much into this knowledge handoff piece, which is associated with risk. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes.